I said it once, I'll say it again. I am beyond happy that we're living in a time of the Renaissance.
You're gonna have a whale of a time!
Do you ever get the feeling people are incapable of not caring? People are amazing.
And today we have The Whale. The Whale is one of those films that I've been hearing talked about for months and months and months and months. Mainly because of who both directed it and who is starring in it. I don't know, I don't have any notes, I'm gonna go with the heart here. I feel like that's appropriate, so let's just get right into it. The Whale is directed by Darren Aronofsky, who is a filmmaker who his films, you either like them or don't. There's rarely a middle ground in opinion with a lot of his films. I'd actually seen more of his filmography than I thought I had. This is the man who brought us such stuff like, you probably know Black Swan. That was one that I remember enjoying when it came out, and even brought me to tears by Natalie Portman's final dance performance in that film. I just remember I was a kid and I was crying. Other movies like Requiem for a Dream, which I have owned for years and have never fucking sat down and watched it. Or even lesser known hits like I saw this one thanks to my mom, Pi. It's an older one. Nobody really knows about it. The mathematics, Fibonacci sequence and whatnot. But Pi was an interesting one. But yeah, directing aside, a lot of people, I'd say 98% of the people going to see this film are seeing it for one big, no pun intended. The star is Brendan Fraser. And without getting into a whole spiel about this man, he's showing up in more and more films these days. You might know him from, classic films back in the day, such as The Mummy, George of the Jungle. Like, he's long and unfortunate history for him, blacklisted from Hollywood for the longest time. But now he's back and he's doing more films, TV series, and stuff like this. And when I saw the first trailer for this, it looked emotional, it looked vague, but it looked like he was putting his whole Brandusi into it. So I didn't care anything besides the fact that he's starring in it, Aronofsky's directing it. I'm gonna see this film. There's other people in this too. It's a very small cast. I think the other actor worth really mentioning would be Sadie Sink of Stranger Things fame. In addition to Brendan in this film, knocks out of the park. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. So that's all I knew about the film, and I figured it was gonna be sad. And all the reviews were talking about how Brendan is transformative in this work and how it's soul and heart crushing, but it's so good. The whole film almost exclusively takes place in just one place, which is Brendan's apartment. He is a morbidly obese man who is, medically speaking, not doing too hot, and he's trying to come to terms with that, reflecting on where his life was and what it's led up to now, and also wants to try to repair or try to salvage what's left of a relationship with his estranged daughter. And that's the movie. I can already kind of see it, like a lot of people making jokes online, or some people that are a bit more on the insensitive side or don't care too much about cinema and people that are gonna obviously make fun of this, because if we're gonna be very reductive, it is just about, an hour 30, hour 40 of just watching a large man struggle with the simplest of tasks and day-to-day life, and also with his family. Personally, I resonated with it a lot, not because I'm obese or anything, but mainly because I've had family that have also been very large in the past, or were large up until they died. And it's very haunting to see a lot of the tools and a lot of the things that he had surrounding him on his couch and that he was using in his day-to-day struggles be the same exact thing that I saw my family member use as well. I never would have thought I'd be haunted by the visual of a grabber being used, or having those big lug plastic jugs that you would fill at the gas station or whatever, just stuff like that. It's little things, the grab bars, just the struggles of getting up and moving around. It's just, the more that I think about it, the more that I am, the word is very appropriate, haunted by it. And so I felt very empathetic and sympathetic towards Brendan's character in this film. And even if you haven't had a similar experience like me or anybody else, or even if you have no context for someone who'd be that out of shape or that physically impaired, you still, through every scene, every frame, you feel it. Brendan This is probably one of the best performances of the year that I saw. I would not be surprised if he was at least nominated for an Oscar in this. The best praise I can give this film is that through most of it, I forgot that I was watching Brendan on screen. He disappears, he vanishes into this character. There were a few times I had to pinch myself and like, oh shit, this is Brendan. That's right, this is Brendan in this movie. I kept forgetting that he is this character, and that's probably the highest praise I can give for an actor. Like you don't even see him. It is emotional. I was almost expecting it to be more emotional, more gut-wrenching, and even darker. It's pretty dark. It's pretty dark. There's some very heavy conversations and thematic material that's discussed and that we watch happen to him on screen. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Granted, that's coming from a guy who is highly desensitized to some of the most vile shit that exists out there in the world of cinema. But for your average viewer, it's going to be a rough watch. There were people crying. There were people sobbing when we went to go see it. I purposefully chose opening night at my local art house theater to see it with a mostly full crowd of people. You could hear the tears. But really the film shows the struggle of obesity and how I too often in the past have kind of looked down on people that have been obese or on the larger side, and my thought process was always, oh, if it's so bad, you could do something about it. Like you could change this. You let it get this far. And while that is true to an extent, it is usually their fault, for lack of a better term. But in a way, it's like addiction, right? Like he didn't just choose to do this. Trauma happened, and then your trauma response, as we all have our different trauma responses. I don't have healthy trauma responses. I become impulsive. I start spending money. I start avoiding certain situations. I will isolate. I have my own series of traumatic responses, but other people have stuff like this. This happens throughout all of America, throughout all of the world, where end of the day, you just let yourself go, and it gets to a very terrible point where it's almost just too far to pull back from. But all stems through trauma. And it gets to a point where even if you don't want to be that way, even if you want to be better, it's hard, if not damn near impossible, to get out of those bad habits. And throughout the whole film, my heart goes out to his character. It's not just triggered overeating, but it's even just the way that he'll shrink back from certain conflicts. He's always trying to be nice. He might raise his voice, but he never has a temper. He never says so much as one cross word to anybody in this entire film. He's just this defeated, broken, bloated, rundown man. I'm sure he drew through some of his own trauma in real life to bring in this character, and god damn does it show. Constantly apologizing when somebody's cross and upset with you, to refusing to give yourself medical coverage because you just don't think it's worth it, or you don't want to have the money and the debt hanging over your head. He's a very sympathetic character, if not all but empathetic, just because at this point a lot of us can identify with depression. I'm getting too much into a film analysis here. Directing is simple but effective. The camera movements I liked a lot in this film. There's simple pans, simple turns, nothing too crazy in terms of camera work. While in this enclosed space, which feels in itself claustrophobic, it is still somehow dynamic in its movement, and whenever you follow him and you feel the weight of his movement and his steps, everything that happens on screen comes across exactly the way that it should. If he accidentally drops an item and he's faced with having to try to get that item, all the struggle is conveyed through even the simplest of things. It did for movement and spatial awareness what Quiet Place did for sound and noise. You don't think about all these things until you're faced with them. Performances, stellar, some of the best I've seen in a movie all year. I got misty-eyed, I shed some tears, and then I shed even more tears, and it was just it was a lot. I didn't break down into sobs this time around like some movies could, but I could easily see myself playing this movie at home when it comes out, getting a little bit, having a couple of drinks in me and just losing it during some of these scenes. A little bit of religious commentary in this film. I always like it when that kind of stuff comes up, not because I love watching people shit on religion, but both sides of the religious coin, the to be or not to be in terms of religion, are discussed and critiqued a little bit in this film. So I always like it when there's an emotional and intelligently driven religious dialogue in a film. It's always interesting to me to see what directors have to say about it. Dialogue is great. Like I said, it's very powerful, very raw emotional stuff. Some of the dialogue in tiny bits here and there borders on melodramatic. I don't mean to nitpick too much, but just some lines are just a little bit like, barely noticeable. It just happens a few times for me anyway. There were some situations that were just a little bit like, if they had leaned too much into it, I wouldn't have been able to take it seriously. But luckily, I was able to take it all seriously. Like I said, I'm not upset about it, but I'm kind of surprised that it doesn't get darker. I would have liked a bit more development for some characters. I would have liked some more scenes of intense dialogue between characters, or just, it was missing a certain je ne sais quoi. I mean, this film was really good. Like, it was damn near fantastic, but definitely, it wasn't perfect, and I can't quite put my finger on why. There's just like a couple ingredients missing in this that just almost made it like an emotional masterpiece, but we're just not quite there. I would have liked for the film to have been resolved a different way. The way the film ends at its climax, it makes sense. I mean, I would have liked something a bit different, but I get why the film went and ended the way that it did, so I can't be too upset about it. Now, I almost wish there was something more to it, because overall, if you want to, again, be very derivative about it, the film is just following a guy for several days in his apartment as he kind of comes to terms with some certain facts of his life and the lives of those that are either close or distant from him, and I would have liked there to have been more, but I digress. Oddly enough, I don't have too much to say about the film aside from it's an experience that I recommend going through. If you like cinema, if you like movies, if you like Brendan Fraser, if you're okay with very emotional, dramatic pieces that may or may not resonate with themes such as depression or obesity or even suicide, anything like that, like it's definitely sad boy hours type of film. But I mean, it's a film that I cannot help but recommend, if anything, only for the performance that Brendan Fraser gives. It's hard to put into words, but it's something you gotta watch, and at the end of the day, it's only about an hour and a half, hour 40, so you're not losing out on too much time or anything. If you get a chance to see it in theaters, I highly recommend doing so. You could also wait till it streams or whatnot, but I would say support this film, go watch it. It's really good. It's a really good film that, the more that I think about it, it could even be fantastic overall, but I don't think it's a masterpiece per se. It gets close to that threshold of what could be a masterpiece, but like you heard me say earlier, just missing a few extra ingredients that I personally would have liked to have seen. But overall, The Whale accomplishes what it sets out to do. In terms of its narrative, characters, simple direction, I have very few complaints. Overall, I think The Whale I would give The Whale a high 4 out of 5. A high 4 out of 5, I think that's a fair rating overall. It might crack my top 10 for the year. I don't know. Part of me kind of wants to revisit it. It's simple, and I don't know if it would work if it was any other actor. That's the thing. Maybe another actor could have done it, but this is just the perfect storm of Brendan Fraser's comeback mixed with a very grounded, very uncanny valley, like just an American tale, honestly, in a way. But this is just a story that a lot of people could probably relate to for a majority of reasons. One that, hell, I related to due to my own trauma in the past and what I grew up around and saw growing up. So it stuck with me and will stick with me for a while. There's some difficult to watch scenes. So I do wonder, if it's not for Brendan, would this film still be as successful as it is right now and as acclaimed as people are saying it is? But I don't know. These are questions for wiser men than I. But overall, I really, really liked The Whale, and I think if I gave it another viewing or two, I could even learn to love it, you know? Call this a Christmas special if you want, I don't know. Just me waxing philosophical about Brendan Fraser and his marvelous acting abilities. I cannot wait to see what else he has to bring to the table in future years. Give this man more projects. He deserves it. We're all very happy for you, Brendan. Stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie I review. And goodbye, travelers.